It's battle report time. So everybody, that is my cheap low rent music for intros for my battle report. And this is the first one that's kind of proper. I know that I did one a few weeks back that was a Triumph and Treachery thing, but like honestly, I forgot to take a lot of photos in that one, so it was kind of empty and loose. Anyway, I made the effort. I took lots of photos in this one, and I think I'm going to be able to put something together that's cohesive and easy to follow. So what we're gearing up here, as you see, is Ogre Kingdoms versus Vampire Counts, and it is a 2,000 point game. We did the scenario of Battle of the Pass. So leading my army is Gurg the Meat Splicer. That's him right here. He is a level 4 Slaughter Master, and he'll have Maw Magic. And his counterpart here, this is a level 2 Hortense the Baker. She does Heaven's Magic. Now the magic spells that we have then, these ones here on this side obviously are the Maw ones. So you can see there is Bull Gorger, Troll Guts, Bone Crusher, and Spine Marrow. And on the Heaven's side, Harmonic Convergence and Curse of the Midnight Wind. On the other side of the table, and we'll show you some models in a second, it is led by the insidious Heinrich Kemmler. Kemmler has the Lore Master of the Vampire Counts magic, so that's all his action right there. Then he's got one other little plebe level 1 wizard, which I don't know the name, so I'm gonna call him Pantsman Soy. He has the Invocation of Nehek. So I snapped this shot after we had deployed and after the Vanguard happened. So I guess I'll quickly go through what we're facing off against there. So at the backfield, in the very back here, where this tree is, those are a pack of zombies. We can see 2 Terrorgeists there above them. And with the mausoleums used as unit fillers, those are 2 big skeleton blocks. Mr. Heinrich Kemmler is tucked in very beginning of that thing. In the tower, there's also a unit of zombies, 20 of them, with the other necromancer inside there, but we just didn't display them on the tower. The other 2 things, which are obviously going to cause me big problems, and I'll talk more about that in a moment, is these 2 units of Hex Wraiths that are vanguarding out above. That will be trouble, because I don't got a whole lot of magic zappy. Yeah, here's just my quick shot to show that that necromancer is in fact tucked inside the building, and we'll just put one model there to represent the zombies. Now over on my side after deployment, I have at the far end of the table, starting from over here, those are 4 lead belchers. I do have some Yetis, so I'm kind of hoping that they'll do something about Hex Wraiths if I can get into them, because they do count as having magical attacks. Up in the center, those are the Iron Guts, and I have both of the wizards tucked inside there. So that makes the unit up to, 8 with 2 heroes. In the back of there, the Thunder Tusk, and then just on the edge of the hill, close to the forest, those are 9 Bulls. They have the extra hand weapon option rather than the Iron Fists, and you can sort of see them blended in there, but right in the middle of all that, in the second rank, that's my Battle Standard Bearer. Just creeping up behind with its nozzle poking out is my Iron Blaster. And this house is in the woods. This happens to be a venom thicket I deployed in there, and I was quite pleased with this deployment, honestly. There's just 10 dudes in there, and being that they're in a venom thicket, obviously if something ever wants to charge them, they would have to go through and take dangerous terrain for that, climb into my house, get nailed by trappers, and it would be hellish. All that for scoring, like 50 victory points. And this shot here will give you a sidelong look at the whole battlefield from behind my lines, looking down the way. And Ogres get first turn. So let's take a look and see what happened. Turn 1. I didn't declare any charges here in this first turn. Those 2 vanguarding units were still about 16 inches away from me. I think even a little bit further from the Yeti. So I did a pretty cautious advance here. these iron guts up the middle with the two wizards, that was a key advance to take advantage of, because this piece here in the center is the arcane ruins, so I can take advantage of extra channeling for that. So I tucked myself in so I was close enough within 6 inches, so both of these wizards could do some multi-channeling if I felt that that was necessary. So in that first magic phase, really only the thing of significance was I stuck a Curse of the Midnight Wind on these guys. The reason I did that is because they were the only immediate threat. I thought if they might want to swoop over and do their flyby attacks on my guys, I would at least make it mildly harder on them to pull that off. But nothing else happened in the magic phase. In the shooting phase, I did take a long bomb cannon shot at this particular terrorgeist right here, although I failed to wound that thing. So that was a bit of sad making times. Actually, this is a little bit of advance because this is the start of Vampire Account's turn 2. You'll see that he backed off both of those vanguarding units and pulled them back within his lines, so he just kind of did a bit of a feint with them and realized that they weren't going to be able to hang out on their own. Otherwise, he did a mild bit of advancing with his 2 skeleton units, stayed pretty close to home otherwise. In the magic phase, he did a little bit of gaze in the gash and zapped up some of those lads over here on this end. He also did a whole lot of raising, and we took this snapshot while he was gathering up his models. So those are the dice rolls to show how many new guys are going to appear in those units. So in the next picture that I take, I'm sure you'll see that there's a little more filled out in those regards. Now, the consequence of both of those spells that he cast, though, is Kemmler was miscasting everything. So he had double 6s on the first one, at which point he was doing damage to all the wizards on the field. So he took a hit, the guy inside the tower took a hit, and then on the second one, he actually dodged the dimensional cascade, but took his second wound. So this guy is down 2 wounds, despite blasting off some spells. And here's just a snapshot up here. Again, we're going to add some dudes to this unit. There's the dice roll, but this fella here also took a wound from the miscasting of Kemmler. Okay, so moving on now to turn 2 for the Ogres. I continued my advance this time, and I did a little bit more so because those Hex Wraiths had backed off. I took up position on that Arcane Ruin and moved the Bulls to threaten some stuff as well. In the magic phase, after stepping up on the Arcane Ruins and doing lots of channeling, I felt pretty good about myself. I show you this photo here, not because I got to cast those spells, because I actually tried to cast the Bone Crusher onto some Hex Wraiths, because that was really one of my only sources of magic damage. I miscast that one though, and lost 2 levels. So these are in fact the 2 spells that my Slaughter Master is now devoid of for the rest of the game. I couldn't be outdone by Kemmler, you see, so I had to also miscast and play that game. In the shooting phase, again, the Iron Blaster actually misfired and turned back around, so that's why I'm skipping ahead to this next turn for the Vampires, because there was nothing else to report from my turn. Now the Vampires decided this was the time to spring the Terrorgeist, so he swooped them up from behind the tower across the forest, supported by these Hex Wraiths on the flank that are going to threaten some things. He is aware that these Yeti have magical attacks, so that's the one thing that he's trying to be cautious about. He likewise on the other flank, he is doing the Hex Wraiths on this side to potentially work some flanking maneuvers, and he was wise enough to get out of my charge arc there on that side to avoid any kind of pain. Kemmler decides to duck inside the tower, because if he's going to miscast in there, then, I don't know, maybe it's a safer place. Nothing exciting going on here other than the zombies are trying to maneuver around, and they're going to try to rejoin the main battle line. This is just a snapshot to see what that last unit of skeletons grew into after a few raising, and just a view from the front here, where the ogres are doing their thing. Should also make mention here that at the tail end of his turn, aside from raising dudes with magic, nothing else really significant happened. His Terrorgeist did fly up though, and they did scream away some Yeti and also some lead belchers. Not entirely, but crippled them. So moving on to turn 3, I took the initiative to charge into this Terrorgeist with both the Thundertusk and the Yeti, hoping to give it the business. I also did try a charge with these ogres in the ruins, but failed and rolled 2 inches. So that was bad crap. Otherwise, the other bulls just kind of repostured a little bit to open up some possibilities. I'm still really fretting about what to do with these particular guys down here, because again, the only magic source I have was that magic missile that I blew away and don't have anymore. The Yeti, who are now tucked in with a Terrorgeist, and I have a magic weapon on my BSB. That's it though. So, moving on. My magic was insignificant. Shooting these lead belchers pipped a wound off of the other Terrorgeist right at the very top of the screen here. You remember from last turn that the Iron Blaster had misfired, so it spent this turn repairing. And then we went ahead to combat. So the results of the combat were pretty light either way. There was only 1 wound caused by me on this Terrorgeist. He knocked a couple wounds off the Yeti, leaving me with only 1 left there. So nobody went anywhere. We stuck around, and that was the end of that combat. So moving on to turn 3 for the vampires. Well, obviously his Terrorgeist jumped ahead and charged into those lead belchers. Oh, why did I just forget what they're called? Hexrace. Thank you. The Hexrace actually tried to charge too, but then after making the charge with the Terrorgeist, realized that wasn't going to be possible because of the spacing in there and the squaring up, etc. So that one didn't work. He also did declare a charge with these skeletons right here to go to my Iron Guts, but he did equally as spectacularly as I did and rolled like a 2 and a 2, so he just bubbled up ahead a little bit, and no action over there. So the disposition of the battlefield at this point after his move phase looks like this. You can see that those skeleton units are buffed up pretty good. Again, the zombies that were in the tower up top here, they've continued to grow, and I think they're up around the neighborhood of 60 odd models now at this point. We'll get a snapshot of those guys in a bit when they come out. And from the vampire count's end, this is the same state of affairs. You'll see that Kemmler popped out of the building again. I guess he was feeling it was uncomfortable in there. One of the reasons he did so is because this little necromancer had his chance at miscasting, and he lost his levels, so he's a level 0 with no spells now. What he did do in the magic phase, though, was Kemmler cast a Hellish Vigor on this. Along the way, he's been healing up wounds, so he's back to fresh at this point as the lore attribute from his spell. And then we get to the shooting phase. So this bat that was in combat with the Thunder Tusk, he screamed real hard at that Thunder Tusk, and that's the number of wounds I've taken. So I'm teetering on the edge of death with a single wound left. Now up here, you may notice this blank space where some lead belchers used to be. Well, that's because this Terrorgeist did what he was supposed to do, and he screamed them off even before combat happened. There you go. That's their empty space. So, I kind of skipped ahead here, but I guess I should point out that because that Thundertusk didn't die entirely, I did manage to eat the rest of that bat and reform to face this one. So at the start of my turn 4, job number 1 was to send both of these things charging into that existing terror bat that was standing right there. So I charged in and flanked him. Also, I finally got to grips with this skeleton unit by charging forward with my Iron Guts. I got there in full force. In my magic phase, I cast the Bubbled Bullgorger so that I could get strength not only on my Iron Guts, but probably more importantly on the Yeti and the Thundertusk. As it turned out, the Yeti was just out of reach, so he didn't get any kind of boost to his strength, but the Thundertusk did. And I'm hoping that it makes it easier to beat up on that Terrorgeist when it comes to combat. Okay, again, here's just a shot of the disposition of the field, just so you can see what the other dudes did. Actually, these bulls did attempt to charge there at the same time that my Iron Guts charged, but I fell short of that one and ended up only just stumbling forward into useless lands. Okay, there again is another quick shot of the combat that's about to happen. He puts little wound markers behind here, and this was after the combat. The truth is that I brought this thing down to, I think, 2 wounds left. In the combat, it was a little bit of a pillow fight despite my strength boost. It just wasn't quite enough to punch through it all. I think he might have made a regen save to keep himself going. Now over to this combat, the reason I show you this dice roll here is because that means that I got the big gut charge. So I was doing die 3 impact hits, and I think out of the impact hits alone, I did 9 wounds on these skeletons. And then with all the other subsequent chopping and hacking and slashing and crumbling, these guys were left with 3 skeletons at the end of all this. So I took the opportunity to reform in ranks, simply because I was expecting to get flanked by these skeletons over here on the side, and I wanted to have a little bit deeper counterattack on them. So we're midway turn 4 now, and I thought I'd give another wide shot to see the disposition of the field at the very beginning of the Vampire turn 4. So you can see here that this at the start of the move phase, these guys are threatening, and the maneuver that they did is they just kind of moved over me and then off. If you haven't seen that Hex Wraith action before, they just kind of do that, and they do their hits as they move through. So the results of that is an ogre and a half were, or sorry, rather 2.5 ogres were killed in that maneuver. As it turns out, he opted not to charge with this skeleton unit, so I was left unharassed over there, I guess, for the moment. The other Hex Wraiths pointed themselves back into the action. I guess they figured if that was going to be in combat over there, they had no business sticking around. And, well, truly, that combat didn't do much. I didn't end up killing that bat, despite my furious action in there. Too many regen saves. He screamed off the Thundertusk before combat, actually, and then just finished off the Yeti in the combat phase. Over here, I of course finished off the last 3 skeletons that were remaining, and then reformed again because I decided that that Terrorgeist was causing me too much trouble and I had to get rid of it. Knowing that I was going to have the next turn, I decided to face that way and head in that direction. So coming in on turn 5 now, that's exactly what I did. Is I sent my Iron Guts to charge that Terrorgeist. This worked out nicely enough for me. I got a Bullgorger off on there in the magic phase. I also was expecting a little bit of messiness over here on this side because they failed another charge to get at those skeletons. So I cast Spine Marrow on them to make them stubborn for any subsequent counterattacks. As it turns out, this may seem like skipping ahead a little bit, but The belly bucks were enough to kill that Terrorgeist with the strength bonus that I had. So we didn't actually get to combat phase, or not the meat of combat phase, but I reformed afterwards to face around here so I wouldn't get flanked by those hex wraiths at the very least. Now on the vampire bottom side of 5, he decided that he wasn't ready for a frontal with those hex wraiths. So again, he did that similar maneuver to the other side where he did this stick and move, drift over me, and he killed off a couple of my iron guts that way. On the other side of the field, he did the very same thing with these fellas. He was in this position, he did the fly over and back, thus murdering a few more poor ogre bulls. But without any combat this round, we move on to the bottom side of 5 for him. Now the reason I show you this picture is for a couple reasons. Kamler returned to the tower. You can see him there in the unit, and he was waffling about whether to bring these guys out at this stage. It's also just so you can see the full size of that zombie unit that it's grown to after all the series of raising. So this brings us now to turn 6, where finally these ogres towards the bottom are going to get some action at last. So here they are. They come trundling forward, and I get the super long bomb charge with my with my iron blaster as well. I figured that guy's doing squat all. I can't cannon off hex wraiths, so the only way for me to get some valuable out of that is to send him in. So I did, and I got a long bomb charge, and in they come into these zombies. The other thing that I did is I decided to march away from those hex wraiths. I got no magic in here at all, so I can't do a single wound against those things. So I try to run away, so at least he can't do that slide through me and swing away and attack. Now moving on to magic, nothing significant happened for me. I didn't get any spells off of significance. I think I got the Bullgorger on these guys again for whatever good that does against zombies. But into the combat, we mowed those zombies down, and this is after combat where we've overran into the skeleton unit as well. So finally the bulls got to get into something, and they enjoyed it. So on his bottom side of 6 though, rather than try to do that sneaky stuff, he finally decided the time was ripe and that he would charge in with hex wraiths. So that's what he's doing here. He charged into the back end of my fellas. Now I debated really long about whether to actually flee from this thing, because I could have fled through the back of those zombies that emerged. You can see them right here. They finally did emerge out of the tower. But that wasn't until after the charge phase, obviously, so I didn't know that they would be there. Anyway, after debating it for a long time, I realized that I shouldn't have, and after I made that decision, we actually diced it off, and he rolled a 10, I think, for his charge, and I rolled only a 6, so he would have mowed me down easy with his Swiss stride. So I stuck it out there. Now, moving ahead, this is just another view of this other charge. These guys actually charged the iron blaster. It would have been in the back end, so I did flee with that one. I managed to escape, and it puts me kind of in the middle of all that mess right there. He did get some Van Hale's dance off in a little bubble neighborhood. That's why it's standing proud like a flag there, so that means everything around here that's involved in combat is going to get rerolls. And the result of that is that I did 0 wounds, as you do with no magic things against hex wraiths. He ran my guys down, so that's the Slaughtermaster, the Butcher, and the 8-man Iron Gut unit, all mowed down by those guys. The Iron Blaster fled, you'll see that in a second. I did some good yeoman's work again with these bulls against some skeletons, and you can see there's just a little more than 2 ranks of them left. I came up and reformed a little bit wider so I could make sure I get extra attacks to finish them off. Now this is sort of a disposition of the field at the end of 6 turns. So here we are now moving to turn 7. Hey, wait a second. Turn 7? You might be thinking, isn't this just a 6-turn game, these things? Well, maybe you're right. Well, I have a couple reasons to explain that. One is Gurg Meatsplicer only has 5 fingers on his hand, so counting past that gets really difficult. On the other hand, Kemmler can only count in scores and scores because that's how many zombies he raises every time. So anyway, that's why we played on. My turn was pretty quick though, obviously not having a lot of elements at play. These ogres happily slayed the remainder of the zombies, or rather the skeletons that I was dealing with. I did manage to rally my Iron Blaster over there, so that's back in play. And I also wanted to remind you that you may have forgotten from the early deployment that these Noblars are still occupying that little chapel in the Venom Thicket, all the way over here at this end. So, turn 7.5, as it turns out, bottom side for the vampires, is they sent both of these Hex Wraiths in to finish off the Ogres. And those zombies charged the Iron Blaster. Now, this is post-combat, actually. Now, I was alluding to throughout the whole game that this particular gentleman right here does in fact have a magic weapon. So he chopped up 4 dudes, amazingly enough. Otherwise, he only caused 2 wounds total. So with my 2 banners, his charge and flank meant that it took a bellower to break the tie in my favor, but I actually held there, which was miracles. Unbelievable. In the other action, these zombies, of course, chased off the Iron Blaster, but it wasn't far enough to run it down, and that's where we left it. So at the end of the day, after 7 turns of fighting, this is what we're left with. I still hold on to the Iron Blaster and the Ogre unit, along with the Battle Standard Bearer and those Noblars living at large way back in the forest. Mighty unit of zombies is still there with Kemmler and his little wizard tucked inside, and both of those Hex Wraith units intact. So we did up some math and try to determine who the winner was. And the end result is this. A big old sad loss for Gurg Meatsplicer and his Ogres against Heinrich Kemmler and his vampire accounts. You can see the score there. Not a gigantic loss, but about 500 points out of 2,000, so significant enough to be noticeable. Anyway, that's a wrap on this battle report. This was all done for the sake of Malorians around the world in 12 games, where in the month of March, the purpose for everybody was to play against or with a Vampire Counts army and post this battle report. So there it is. Hope it was enjoyable for you, because I had a fun time doing it. Let me know how you feel about this battle report format. I'll try to polish my stuff in the future and give you improved action as the months tick past.